All right, welcome back to our videocast series, Beyond the IT Headlines, where we go beyond the press releases to explain what's really happening in the world of IT and data, and more specifically, what it means for your business. Today's topic, we're going to tackle AI data factories, the modern day factories behind this era's industrial revolution. We're going to talk about what they are, who's getting them right, and what it takes for an AI data factory to hum in a world where inference is always on. I'm Shawn Rosemarin, and today it's my absolute pleasure to be joined by Kaycee Lai, Vice President of AI here at Everpure. Welcome to the show, Kaycee.
Hey, thanks for having me, Sean. Really looking forward to this.
Yeah, so I mean, you're fresh off the visit down to GTC.
I am.
Let's dive right in. I mean, at GTC this year,
Yep.
just last week, in fact, Jensen said that the inflection point of inference has arrived. He was clear it's not a product. There is no inference thing. But it was a declaration that the industrial rules have changed and most enterprise infrastructure hasn't been built for what's coming next. You know, he kind of talked about this new Nvidia Dynamo service, which they're kind of really resting their future on, and compared it to the original Siemens generator from 1866 that transformed the Industrial Revolution. How this was kind of set a whole bunch of things in place in terms of driving a new way that we manufactured and built products. Um, I guess my question to you is, what does this mean for the enterprise? I mean, is inference and where are we as an enterprise in terms of adoption here? And what should people really be taking away from
Yeah.
Jensen's
So,
keynote?
look, I think sometimes we get too caught up with fancy words. I'm a pretty simple guy. Um, for me, inference means you're actually using it. That's it's as simple as that, right? We get too caught up with whole training, prep, and all that. Inference means you're actually using it. And so I think the main point I think Jensen talked about, and I think it's actually a very important point, is we're at a point where people can actually operationalize and actually put AI into production, which I think is a pretty big point. That's a very key point because I think we've been flirting with cool things and cool experiments you can do. And sure, there's things you can do in the kind of personal side, on the entertainment side, but enterprises have actually been really slow, right, to really operationalize AI. Yes, there are chatbots and co-pilots that we use, but I think what Jensen's talking about is something different, right? It's really this concept, this AI factory concept, where it is actually core to your entire operations, right? So it's not a single app, right, that's hosted in SaaS with limited amount of data. It is really something that you would use every single day. And so it's really the idea that AI is now core. AI now is part of everything that we do. It touches everything, all data, all departments. And so by shifting kind of the focus onto inference, I think is really messaging that people are ready or should be ready. Maybe I should say the technology is ready for people to actually consume inference safely and on a regular basis in production.
Okay, so if we're going to talk about this as a factory and we're going to relate it to the Industrial Revolution, let's just play with that analogy since that's what came out. Describe to me what are the inputs and what's the process and what is the output of this proposed AI factory?
That's it's a good point to think about that. So, okay, go in the factory analogy. The input is data, right? You you get if without data, there's nothing to come out, right? There's nothing to do AI against. So that is a very, very key input. It's data. Somewhere in the middle, obviously, is the models, right? That actually get used. Um, then you can have the applications sitting on top of that. Now, as with factories, what's the most fundamental thing you need? Power. Power and space. You need a place to actually put your factory, right? You need all the plumbing stuff. That's where all the infrastructure goes, right? The servers, the networking, the storage, compute, that's without that, you have no place to physically put, right, your factory. Now, the output is going to be what you can consume. So the output can be an application. The output could be a data set. The output could be a video. The output could be a PowerPoint. It could be that thing that we normally consume. Now, I always like to put things a little bit even simpler than that. That is, I think people make the mistake of trying to force AI into this something new. Like, oh my God, I have to create this new use case, this new category for AI. You don't. Like, there are problems that you already have today. There are problems that we've been solving and trying to solve for 30 years. That AI just makes it better and faster to solve. Gives you more clarity and visibility.
So, so, so I want to jump into that, Casey, because the way this is being explained, it's almost like, okay, if you want to have AI, you got to put one of these factories on your floor, and that's going to be your AI factory. And I think people are misunderstanding this is not a product. This is a way of envisioning your data platform and the way data travels through your organization. But I just think the nuance is missed. And I want to make sure that we do as good a job as we can of clarifying that this is
You're
not a product. This is a way of architecting and viewing
correct.
your data
So
estate.
imagine if I go see a bread factory versus a car manufacturing factory, versus a factory that makes, eyeglasses, they're all going to look really different, right? There's no single way that you can have a factory. And I think the same thing applies. And I think Nvidia would also agree. Now, what they try to do is give blueprints and say, here are guidances, recommended reference architecture that we believe if you have these components and if you have these certified integrated pieces together, you're going to get a decent outcome, right? You're going to have a good experience. But short of that, you're absolutely right. It's not a product that you can buy. Now, I know it gets confusing because if you go to every tech vendor's website, they'll say, buy our AI factory, right? And look, I think what they're really trying to say is buy this bundled prepackaged set of products that include models, includes tools, includes compute, networking, and storage. That's probably the closest and most accurate definition when a vendor say, I have an AI factory to sell you, right? But you're right. It's not a single product. It's not a single SKU that you can go because it will vary greatly on, again, you making phone factory, making a tire factory, you're making a bread factory.
Yeah, it's really a new way of visualizing and architecting the way your data, I like the way you put it, your inputs, right? Your streams, your databases, all of your business critical systems, all your systems of engagement, those kind of come in one end of the factory. You have to process, connect, contextualize, integrate all those data sources. And then what's coming out the other end is the value. And I think it's as good as any an analogy to call it a factory. But then, yes, you've got this confusion of every vendor selling their own factory when I think what you're really saying here is the major takeaway is to think differently the way in which you collect, amalgamate, and drive context out of your data, as opposed to think
Yeah,
about
and
what
and
hardware am
not
I
to
going to
make
buy.
things more complicated, but, because in the age of AI, things move so quickly, right? So agents can be both a source, right? The input for the factory, as well as, something that consumes the output of the factory. So this becomes a little bit more interesting, right? So it's not as static or it's not as straightforward sometimes, right? Like we gave the high level, but once you get into AI, this is where things get very interesting. And I think one of the key points that was brought up was Agent Claw and NemoClaw, right? So now,
Mhm. Why don't you just take a moment, just explain to
yeah,
folks this OpenCLAW concept, I'll call it the claw
yes,
concept, is kind of becoming a pretty big idea where, we as humans trust machines enough to give them access to everything in our life and let them start to enact and act like us. I mean, I understand that this is good for Nvidia. This is going to consume a lot of GPUs, but what's the
yeah.
reality
So
behind all this?
unofficially, there's urban legend that CLAW, CLAW, stands for Continuous Learning Autonomous Worker, right? So it's always learning, it's autonomous, right? It's continuous, and it could actually be something that could mimic a human worker, right? That you would have. And so I think we evolved from single agents into multiple agents, right? And then we evolved from that into, well, once I have multiple agents, I need a framework where I can coordinate and orchestrate all these different agents together to do a single task, right? Just like you and I do a lot of stuff during the day, right? We're not just single threaded on one task. Well, think of an agent that answers email, an agent that meets with people, an agent that generate PowerPoints. Coordinated, that becomes Kaycee and Shawn, right? From a day-to-day perspective. So that's kind of this notion of like OpenCLAW and AgentCLAW, like being able to have this seamless coordination, right? And automation. Now, as you and I both know, enterprises are always very, very particular about governance, about security, about trust, right? So while the framework exists, right, to actually automate all this and actually get to the point where, yeah, like I have now effectively a worker doing all these tasks for me. Can I trust it? Right? Can I trust that this worker is going to abide by my company corporate policies, right? And I think this is where NemoClaw gets interesting because now Nvidia is saying, hey, we have the blueprint for you to actually put in this framework in a governed way that's going to pass the sniff test, right? By IT and governance, which is kind of a big deal because now it's like saying, hey, you can trust not only the building, but the actual deployment and usage, right, in production of these coordinated, orchestrated agents. It's kind of a big deal, right? And so once you start having that, you're right. Once things become automated, agents don't sleep. Agents don't take breaks, right? They don't take vacations. Agents can work at a rapid speed and iterate, right, way more faster than humans. So every single time it does that, guess what it's doing? It's consuming resources. And it's not just GPU, it's everything. If you had an agent that's generating output, that's generating storage. It's consuming storage.
Well, and that's where I want to pull on. So, look, it sounds like we're jumping ahead down this journey of AI very, very quickly. We went from LLMs to agents to complex agentic workflows to now this OpenCLAW, constantly learning, always working. Sounds like a dream for every employee. Um, but what this is actually going to do is this going to have independent and autonomous work being done really alongside or outside of the direct purview of the human. I guess my question to you is, this sounds like a major operational constraint because now these factories that we talked about earlier are no longer just an infrastructure and a way that organizations use data, but a factory built for this concept of always on inference, constantly getting hit by machine based agents, asking it for different things. Feels like it was very different than what was originally designed for AI training.
Well, look,
What's
training
what's
is
your point of
always a
view
means
there?
to an end, right? You train something because you actually want to use it, right? So I'm not at all surprised, right? Again, if we go back to the analogy of the factory, what is a good factory known for? It's running 24/7. It's constant. Like if I'm hostess and I'm making Twinkies and ho-hos and ding dongs, I'm constantly taking ingredients. I'm constantly making the goodies. I'm constantly shipping them out. And every single time I have wait time where people aren't putting things on a conveyor belt, I'm losing money. Every single time I have wait time where trucks aren't getting loaded, I'm losing money. So it's actually not that far off if you think about it, right? An efficient factory is constantly running, consuming inputs and generating outputs. And
But that's my concern is if I use OpenClaw and I build out these autonomous agents and they're now doing things, and for some reason my AI factory gets interrupted, to your analogy, the factory isn't
yeah,
producing Twinkies or whatever your particular
does it
snack
does it
food of
look like I've had
choice.
some
Well,
too many Twinkies, Sean? Is that what you're saying?
well, now my work has stopped, right? I've probably changed the work of the people who were doing that previously. And now I've got actual functions in my organization that can't move. So I kind of want to bring it back. Like you described the shift earlier in your DataWire article, and you talked about going from one question every 3 months to three questions a minute, and now even maybe 30 questions a second. But with agents running around the clock, I mean, I guess let's get back to the real business. When you're out with customers and you're talking about this, and they're trying to solve for how they're going to evolve their data estate to move to an AI factory concept and be able to look at agentic workflows like OpenClaw or Claw of their choice, what are the main things to
Yeah,
kind of
so
unpack here?
let's take a step back. One, as with any new technology and framework, there's always what you can do versus what you should do, versus what you're allowed to do, right, within an organization. So, yes, while you can allow these agents to run autonomously to do the things that you say, this is where, Nvidia and Jensen is really pushing hard on the framework of NemoClaw, right? That NemoClaw will have the governance in there, right? And they can integrate with their existing governance frameworks and tools to ensure that what you have to automate will abide by that. So that's their step that they're recognizing. Exactly your point. Hey, it might be kind of scary if you just let things run wild. Well, NemoClaw is supposed to say, no, it's not going to run wild, right? Because you're going to tell us what your framework is for governance and security, and we're going to make sure we follow that so you feel good. Um,
So would it be fair, Casey, for me to take what you just said and say Nvidia is providing the road system, the traffic lights, the stop signs, the lane markers, the speed limits, and then essentially asking enterprises to go put their cars on the road to go where
I
they
I
need to
think
head?
that's not too far off, right? I think that's I would depending on the day you catch me, Sean, and depending on my mood, I might get a little bit punchy and I actually, go one step further, but I think in general, that's pretty accurate, right? The blueprints that they're prescribing, the frameworks that they're giving, are really a way where they want everyone to if everyone can build accordingly to this, right? Then yes, we should have autonomous vehicles being able to drive without knocking into each other because they're going to obey traffic laws and traffic lights. And if they can do that and they have the right sensors, the right training, should be okay, right? Case in point, Waymo, right? It seems to be working well. So, so I think that's one part. The second part is, look, these agents and these frameworks don't build themselves. At least not yet. I mean, they could, but at least not yet. So a human still has to get involved. Like I still have to build, and I've actually built a tool that actually employs OpenCLAW and NemoClaw. But it was very specific, right? I built a tool that we use internally, right? At Everpure called Abby, where I can help us a salesperson can say, "Hey, I'm about to meet an account. Help me figure out what AI use cases would add value to them." And help me figure out who I need to have this conversation with. And then help me connect the dots with which products from Everpure could solve that and explain why, and then generate the collateral for me, right? And so that I'm ready to have this conversation. And then, hey, I got this thing called Kraken. Let me connect to that and make sure I'm ready to say why is Everpure's products better than my competitors and be ready for that. Well, what I've just described to you is it's a series of tasks that an agent can do. It's actually a series of tasks that multiple agents are required to do. And so when I built this tool before last week, I had like 11 agents, right? And a human has to say, okay, now I'm ready to get the contacts. Now I'm ready to get the value proposition. Now I'm ready to get this and that. And what OpenClaw kind of opened my mind was, oh my God, in one prompt. Like, for example, let's say I built all that for AT&T, just making it up, right? And I have it specifically to the VP of networking, specifically for this use case, specifically for this application that he wants. And beautiful. And then let's say I'm the account rep and I find out next week, wait a minute, we're actually meeting the CFO who doesn't care about network congestion. He cares about dollars and cents. He cares about ROI and TCO. I'm gonna have to change my whole presentation. I'm gonna have to change my whole value prop, my whole TCO, my whole ROI, and my whole pitch deck. Biggest nightmare when you're on the front lines in sales. Well, imagine just entering one prompt and actually just saying, "I'm about to meet the CFO." Change this whole entire app and workflow to reflect TCO, ROI, and cost savings, and it does. This is how powerful it is, right? Now, and again, yeah,
Well, and I get
yeah.
it. I appreciate the simplicity of the message. I guess let's kind of shift back to GTC. So we talked about the AI factory, we talked about NemoClaw, we talked about this agentic move forward. But let me be a little critical here. There was still a lot of talk about the next bigger GPU and what was going to come after Grace Hopper, and what was going to come after Vera Rubin, and how many teraflops we were talking about. And it still feels like when we get out in the enterprise, we talk to customers, performance is less of the discussion. It's the fact that their data is not ready and their data center and their operational structure is not ready for what this is going to bring. So, if you're a CIO that walks out of this GTC meeting last week, what are the three things you're really thinking about, and what's most urgent
It's
for
a
you
good
to
question. This
address?
is something I've been had a lot of conversations with customers at GTC and even before GTC, right? And so everything you brought on is correct. It doesn't matter how rock solid how your platform doesn't matter how great the performance is. Um, Number one, if you actually don't even know what the use case you're trying to solve for, what questions you're trying to answer, and for who and what the expected outcome is, it's kind of like I gave you the world's most powerful tool. But if you know, like, yeah, my wife can attest, I am the world's worst handyman, right? You can buy me the most badass power drill. It's probably wasted on me. I can probably get one for 19.99, and I probably wouldn't know the difference, right? But in the hands of someone who's really skilled, they can probably do amazing things with that. And so it's very, very similar. And most enterprises, believe it or not, Sean, they don't know. When I meet with them, I say, so what are you guys doing for AI? What AI use cases, AI outcomes are you hoping to drive? Shocking. Most don't know, right? And so a lot of people are buying the infrastructure ahead of time, which is you and I've been around long enough to know that sometimes leads to something else, but they're struggling with even what outcomes they're trying to drive. And if you don't know the outcomes, then you don't know your audience. Who am I driving it for? If you don't know that, then you don't know the data, what data you actually need. And if you don't know that, you're not getting data readiness. You're not getting AI readiness, right? So there's all these chains of dependency that needs to happen. Otherwise, you don't know if your infrastructure is actually ready for AI. That this is the thing is without knowing these things, you're never going to actually use the infrastructure in a way that's going to deliver value. And if you never do that, then how do you actually know if your infrastructure is actually capable and ready to do that? So this is kind of the aha moment. I think people are now starting to wake up because once they start seeing case studies and success stories of people actually getting value out of it, people are now going, oh, I didn't know I could do that. And again, a lot of them, Sean, they're not newfangled, crazy use cases that's never happened. It's like traditional stuff like, oh, predictive maintenance for manufacturing. Okay. Oh, real-time inventory planning, for supply chain. Okay, got it. There's things that AI can do there. And so I think this is where a lot of CIOs really need to partner with their business and really say like, hey, what can we solve that's really going to make a difference from a business outcome?
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I want to use that to sort of round us out here. So if I get back to your hostess analogy from earlier, the most important thing is what do customers want to buy? What are they going into the store to consume? What's actually going to sell? Whatever sell means. And from there, you can determine the ingredients that you need and the machines, the factory that you're going to need to produce it. And you're going to size your machines based on the velocity of which you have to produce. Not too much, not too little, just enough, making sure you can scale. And then you're going to tool up, in your case, right, all the AI tool sets to be able to produce what you need. So, what you've convinced me is this factory concept actually makes a lot of sense in terms of how we think about this. But I loved how you worked backwards. Start with the customer, start with the end product, start with the use case, then determine the data you're going to need to solve that use case, determine the readiness of the data, and then look at the factory that you're going to have to build in order to produce it. I mean, that really, really helps me get my head around this. And I hope it's helped the rest of our audience as well. I mean, look, folks, GTC is evolving every year. And clearly, what we saw this year was we've kind of gotten out of this whiz bang, wow, this is a brand new thing. Let's teach everybody into really, this is actually taking shape. This is evolving faster than we anticipated. LLMs, agents, NemoClaw, and we're going to have to start treating an AI data factory under the same construct and thinking that we would an industrial manufacturing shop. So, with that, Kaycee, I really, really appreciate your time today. And for those that are listening, please make sure you like and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. You'll find Beyond the IT Headlines on Spotify and YouTube. And for more data, tech, and IT news, make sure to check out thedatawire.com. With that, and for Kaycee Lai, I'm Shawn Rosemarin, and we'll see you next time.